Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Are We on the Same Page? This is my third video in my sub-series on future inventions, predicted future inventions. And I did the very near future, which I'm defining as 2025 to 2049, as well as the near future, which I'm defining as 2050 to 2099. Today I'm going to talk about the third or fourth future eras that I'm predicting, namely what I call the distant future, which is 2100 to 2149, i.e., the first half of the 22nd century. I don't think too many of us will be alive then, but at least this will be some technologies that I think some of your children or grandchildren will probably enjoy. Anyway, let's begin. So, before I begin, as usual, I'm going to give a plug for my book called My Spiritual Journey. I spent about a year and a half writing this. It's been available since the middle of 2023. You can buy it on Amazon.com, both either in Kindle or in paperback. And the best way to search for it is to type my pen name, Dave Thomas Rocker. And anyway, check it out. I think you'll like it. Anyway, that's a plug from my book. Now let's begin the video. So, for those of you who haven't seen my previous videos on my predicted future inventions, like I said, I'm dividing the future into four eras, at least the next 175 years. The What I'm calling the very near future is 2025 this year until 2049. I already did a video on that. And then I also did one on what I'm calling the near future, which is the latter half of the 21st century, this century, i.e., 2050 to 2099. I did that as well. And today I'm going to do the third of these eras, which I'm calling the distant future. That's the first half of the 22nd century, i.e., 2100 and 2149. And after this, I'm going to do one last video on predicted future inventions, namely the second half of the 22nd century, namely 2150 to 2199. I think I should say a little bit about these images. So the image for the very near future doesn't look too much different from today. This is just a large city, a picture of a large city like maybe Hong Kong or Singapore, and I think we can just expect to see a lot more of these in the next 25 years. Not too earth shaking. But then the other three pictures all show other worlds. So the second picture is supposed to be a picture of Mars. This is supposed to be a Mars colony, a large Mars colony, or a city on Mars, along with a hyperloop. And then the third picture, the one on the bottom left, shows the interior of a space colony. This one is shaped like a torus or a large donut. Not my favorite design. I prefer the O'Neill cylinders, but I think we can expect to see a lot of these during the first half of the 22nd century. And then the last one is a picture of what I'm imagining is a distant world, probably in another star system. By then, I think we will have colonies in Alpha Centauri and maybe even a few other nearby star systems. So anyway, that's just kind of an overview. And anyway, let's get started with the distant future, which is the first half of the 22nd century. So and I'm counting them down when I'm considering the 10 most important predicted inventions of the first half of the 22nd century. So at number 10, this shouldn't be too much of a surprise, the android. This has appeared in lots and lots of sci-fi stories. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with androids. There was Data on Star Trek: The Next Generation. And for those of you guys who don't know what an android is, it's really just a human-like robot. And I'm virtually certain we'll have these by the first half of the 22nd century. We may even have them before then. I mean, we already have robots. We have industrial robots. We even have robots that look kind of human like. I mean, they don't behave human like. It's easy to make a robot that looks like a human. I think there's even one at Disneyland. I forget what it's called, but we've made some of these, but they don't can't do a whole lot. I mean, when I'm talking about androids here, I'm talking about robots that not only look like humans but also perform like humans, i.e., they perform all the usual biological functions, like they could eat and drink and sleep and even have sex. You could even have sex with an android if you want. But they'd be able to do everything humans can do, and obviously probably a lot more because they have, computer brains. They could probably do, amazing calculations in, an amazingly short time. So I think we can expect to see these things by the first half of the 22nd century, maybe even before that. Anyway, that's androids. And number nine. Now we're getting into some kind of weird sci-fi here, but this isn't as far out as you might think. Mind reading device. I mean, we're already working on stuff like this. I'm not an expert on this, but I know that, I think since the 1990s, there's been some pretty remarkable advances in neurology, neuroscience. I mean, we can already do CAT scans of the human brain. We can monitor brain activity, and I don't know anything about brain waves, but supposedly we can monitor brain wave activity. And I think we might even be able to monitor. I think we can monitor sleep. I don't know if we can monitor dreams. I think we kind of can because dreams is just REM sleep or deep sleep. But what I'm talking about here would be like a mind reading device. This would be a device that you could actually, I guess, hook up these electrodes or whatever they are to your head, and maybe someone else could have a receiving end where they could read your thoughts by connecting to these electrodes. I mean, this has been appeared in a lot of sci-fi stories, including the first Back to the Future movie. Except I think you guys all remember the Doc Brown's. The one he tried to develop didn't work. But I mean, we probably will have something like this that does work. But I think it's a lot harder than you might imagine. I mean, there are reported, I was looking this up on the web, and I know there's a lot of reported claims of people already making these mind reading devices. I think they even have devices you can hook up to your head, and then you can hook the other end up to a computer, a PC, and it'll say what you're thinking about somehow if you can decode it properly. But that's a long way from what I'm talking about. I mean, see, the reason why I think this is not even going to happen until the 22nd century is because the brain is just unbelievably complicated. We don't even we know practically nothing about how the human brain works, and we don't even have reliable psychiatry or psychology. And I know this for a fact because I've been a psychiatrist for a big part of my life, and I don't think they've done very much good for me. I think the best psychiatrists are just paid friends, basically. They're the best. The worst are the ones that think they know how the human brain works and they don't. So just take my word for that. So if we can't even have a shrink that can analyze us and help us in the right way, why do we think we can make a mind reading device? I mean, come on. So I think we're a very, very long way away from this. I don't think we're going to have this until we really have a much better understanding about how the human brain works. But then we can enjoy these mind reading devices, and I don't know if that'll be good or bad. It depends, whether or not people want to have their mind read or whether we want to read other people's minds. And I know there's a lot of people in this world I wouldn't want to know what's going on in their brain, especially Trump. So I don't know if this is a good thing or not, but we'll see. But I think we will have this for better or for worse by the first half of the 22nd century. Number eight, closely related to mind reading device, a dream inducer. Actually, I think I like this one better. This, I think it's pretty obvious to think what the advantages of this would be. I mean, we could avoid nightmares if we could pre-program our dreams. Say, I want to dream about, I guess a floating city somewhere, or you want to dream about whatever you want to dream about. Dream about your ideal mate. Dream about a ideal vacation. In some imaginary world. Dream about whatever you want to dream about. and you could induce these dreams, and that'd be a pretty wonderful thing, I guess, as long as we're in control of it. We could even induce lucid dreams. I don't know how many of you guys have ever had a lucid dream. I've had a couple of them. They're pretty amazing, and I think they're very hard to achieve. I don't even know how you would train yourself to have lucid dreams, but I've had a couple, and they've been pretty recently. I had a lucid dream about 10 years ago. It was my first ever lucid dream, and I was sleeping at my friend's house. I think it was around 5 in the morning. I was kind of struggling to get up, and I had a pretty powerful dream of being on a jet ski, or I think it was a speedboat, and it looked like a video game. It was kind of weird because I was riding around on this jet ski, and it was like was controlling the jet ski, and I realized the only way you can have a lucid dream is if you know you're dreaming but you don't wake up. Usually, when people realize they're dreaming, they wake up immediately. But I knew this was a dream, but I didn't want to get out of it, so I just kept going with it. And I was like playing this video game of playing, controlling this jet ski. It even looked like a video game. I think it even had my score in the corner. So it was pretty wonderful. And I think I had another lucid dream once, but I don't remember that one. But maybe we could induce more lucid dreams or whatever kind of dreams we want. And maybe some of these dreams might help us in various ways. We don't know. But I don't see much downside to this unless some man controls it for us. But anyway, that's dream inducers. Number seven, bionic implants. This is something that's been in sci-fi for quite some time. I don't know how many of you guys remember, there was a very popular TV show in the 1970s called The $6 Million Man, starring Lee Majors. He was supposed to be the world's first bionic man. I guess the government had figured out how to make bionic implants, and Steve Austin, that was his name on the show. He was supposed to be an astronaut who had nearly died due to an accident. But they not only saved his life, but they gave him some bionic implants, so he became super strong and super fast. He could run like 65 miles an hour. He could lift a car, and he even had a bionic eye that would allow him to see like distant objects. I don't know how far away, but uh, that was the plot of the show. Of course, he was he had to work for the U.S. government. So they always gave him these assignments to catch these bad guys. That was the show. Yeah, and it was a pretty corny show. I mean, I remember it. He was supposed to be super fast, but every time he did something bionic, including running, they showed it in slow motion. So even though he was supposed to be running 60 miles an hour, it looked like he was running about 2 miles an hour. Pretty corny, you know. Of course, he got all the women too because he was a super strong and super fast guy, and what could beat that, right? So a little bit corny. He didn't have a bionic brain, unfortunately. He could have used one. But anyway, that was a $6 million man. And, I mean, I think we're pretty long way away from this, although we do have what are called prosthetic implants. We have artificial limbs. We've had them for a while. I don't think they're as good as the real limbs. Maybe they're sort of as good, or maybe in some ways a little stronger. I don't know. But we're not bionic. We're far, far way away from the $6 million man. And I don't think we're going to be able to run 65 miles an hour until the 22nd century. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. But anyway, we'll have to wait and see how this one develops. Anyway, number six. Now we're getting some kind of exciting ones here, I think. Personal spaceship. And this is kind of like the Jetsons. I mean, this has been predicted for a long time. This is nothing new. And this is like a novel cover, I think, from probably the 1950s or something. But I mean, the Jetsons, I think, most of you guys have probably seen the Jetsons where they have their own personal, I guess would call them flying cars. I don't think they used them much in space, but I think by the early 22nd century, we'll not only have flying cars, which we've been predicting, since the mid 20th century, and I think most people at that time had thought we would have them by now. I think the main reason we haven't is because we've had the energy crisis, and we're running out of fossil fuels, and we have to develop, other ways of producing the amount of energy that's required for these things. Uh, but I think once we have fusion, we're going to have plenty of energy, and we'll have our flying cars. Not only flying cars, I think we'll have personal spaceships. You'll be able to go off on a trip with your wife and kids, in a little personal spacecraft. Maybe you take off from the moon or from Mars and, go visit the asteroids with your kids, and I'm sure they would love that. So anyway, that's a personal spaceship. Uh, Number five, kind of same theme, but much more grandiose, starship. And of course, we've been predicting starships for a long time. Just watch any of the Star Trek episodes, or not just Star Trek, but Star Wars or 2001. Well, I mean not 2001, but I mean it's been a very popular idea in sci-fi for quite a while that we're going to have spaceships that can venture to other star systems. And I think we will have the first of these probably by the early 22nd century. But one thing you have to realize is just how distant the stars are. I mean, the closest star to the sun is Alpha Centauri, the Alpha Centauri star system. There's actually several stars. I think the closest one is called Proxima Centauri. But this is about 4.2 light years away. That means that it would take light, which is the fastest known thing in the universe still. It would take light 4.2 years to reach Alpha Centauri. And it does take light that long. The light we see from Alpha Centauri left Alpha Centauri 4.2 years ago. So we're not seeing Alpha Centauri as it looks today. We're seeing how it looked 4.2 years ago. And, of course, since, according to the theory of relativity, nothing can faster travel than the fast travel faster than the speed of light. That means, as far as we know, it's impossible to go to Alpha Centauri in less than 4.2 years. But one interesting consequence of special relativity is time dilation. Even though it would take 4.2 years as measured on Earth, it could take a lot less than that as measured in your spaceship. I mean, you could go to Alpha Centauri if you had a fast enough spaceship that could go close to the speed of light, say 9.9 times the speed of light. You could get to Alpha Centauri in what would seem to you like a year. But then if you went back to Earth, maybe it would seem like only 2 years had passed for you. But by the time you get back to Earth, it's 10 years. So everybody you know would be 8 years older. They would have aged 8 years more than you. That's what's known as the twin paradox. And of course, you could extend this idea. You could actually, I've done this calculation. Another problem with approaching the speed of light is the number of g forces that you have to experience in order to do it. And the speed of light is so fast that at 1 g, in other words, the acceleration that's equivalent to the Earth's gravity, it would take about a year to reach the speed of light. So that means that, I've done this calculation. You could actually, in about 60 years, you could travel across the whole Milky Way galaxy. For you, only 60 years would pass if you did that. But if you came back to Earth, you'd be 60 years older, but then it would be 100,000 years later. So everybody you know would have died a long, long time ago. You'd come back to the Earth in the year 100,000, 102,000 AD, and I don't know what the Earth would look like then. But all your friends and relatives would be gone. It would be a completely different world. And I don't think there's very many people who would want to do that. So, but maybe, I mean, one way sci fi authors have been getting around this for a long time is they imagine it'll be possible to discover someday how to travel faster than the speed of light. I really don't like this. I think this is cheating. As far as we know, we can't. And if you could, then you get into the whole thing about time travel. Because if it were possible to travel faster than the speed of light, it would also be necessarily possible to go back in time. That's a consequence of special relativity, and that opens up kind of a can of worms because there's so many paradoxes associated with time travel that it seems like it shouldn't be possible. I don't know, maybe it is, but that's pretty long shot prediction. So I'm not going to venture that far. I'm not going to say we're going to be able to figure out how to travel fast in the speed of light. But if we can approach the speed of light, I think we will have starships by the first half of the 22nd century. And I think we'll probably have our first voyages to some of the nearby stars by then, which will be pretty exciting. Number four, cure for cancer. I mean, we've wanted this for a really long time. I'd say most of the 20th century up to today. This has been a big dream of society. I mean, cancer is a horrible disease, and it's been a horrible disease for I guess all of our history. I mean, right now it's a second leading cause of death. I even have cancer. I got prostate cancer about a year ago, and I'm getting treated for it tomorrow. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to have some radiation treatment. The good news for me is that they caught it very early, and my doctor is confident that they can get rid of all of it with radiation treatment. But I have to go for 9 weeks. I have to get 45 doses of radiation for my prostate. I heard the side effects are going to be pretty bad while this is going on. But I'm glad they're doing it. I mean, I'll probably live a full life. They said they're confident they can get rid of all the cancer, so I hope they're right. But, that's not a cure, that's just a treatment. I mean, a cure would actually be preventing cancer, not only, stopping whatever cancer people have completely, getting rid of all of it, but, preventing it in the first place. And, that would be wonderful if there's no more cancer. But we haven't figured out how to eradicate cancer yet. But I'm pretty sure we will by the early 22nd century, maybe even before that. I mean, the sooner the better. But we've made so many advances in medicine and in genetics that I just can't imagine that we won't have a cure for cancer by the early 22nd century. So that'll be wonderful. People born in the 22nd century or later won't have to worry about cancer anymore. That'll definitely be a benefit for society. So let's hope we do have that. Number three. Oh, this is one that's pretty exciting. An antimatter power plant. In the last video, I talked about a matter antimatter reactor. Well, it's not much of a stretch to go from a matter antimatter reactor to an antimatter power plant. Kind of like going from the first nuclear reactor, which was the atomic pile at Chicago, done by Enrico Fermi in 1942. Then about 12 years later, we had the world's first nuclear power plant built in the Soviet Union. A couple of years later, we had them in the United States now. The United States get about 8% of their power from nuclear power. France gets 70%. But, it's kind of the same idea going from a matter antimatter reactor. I'm not going to go through how that works again, but, once we have that, it's not much of a stretch to get power from annihilating matter with antimatter. And antimatter is known, like I said in my previous video. It's been known since 1932. It's also known that if you bring together a certain amount of matter and the same mass of antimatter, you put them in contact with each other, all the matter and all the antimatter annihilate each other and get converted into energy. V equals mc squared. You don't have to have much of it. If you had just 1 kilogram of matter and 1 kilogram of antimatter brought them together, that would all get converted into 1.8 times 10 to the 17th joules. That's a hell of a lot of energy. That would probably power the Earth right now for about a day. So you could get that just from 2 kilograms of matter and antimatter combined. The challenge would be producing the antimatter. You have to be able to make enough antimatter to do this. But I talked about this in my last video, and I'm not going to talk about it again. They're already making antimatter at CERN in Switzerland. They're not making very much of it, but we just have to scale it up. We have to figure out how to either make enough antimatter to annihilate enough matter to produce enough energy for our needs, or else find it. Maybe there is antimatter on outer space somewhere that we haven't discovered yet. maybe there's meteors or asteroids made of antimatter. I kind of doubt it, but you never know. Could be out there. We don't know. Anyway, so that I think would be a really great one. That's why I put it at number three. And this, by the way, would give us about 100 times more energy than fusion. Fusion, I talked about fusion already. I think we're going to need the world's first fusion power plant very soon. I said in my first video that I hope we get it by 2049. I think we kind of need it by then. But once we have fusion, we won't. I don't think it'll be such an urgent need for an antimatter power plant, but it'll be a nice thing because it'll give us 100 times more power. But anyway, that's an antimatter power plant. Number two, this is something I think is really exciting. This is a room temperature superconductor. And I read once that if we ever discover a room temperature superconductor, that it'll have as big an impact on the world as the invention of the wheel. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement. But I guess I have to explain superconductors to you first. So I don't know how many of you guys know about superconductors, but superconductivity is a phenomenon by which if you cool down certain materials, I think most metals do become superconducting if you cool them down to a low enough temperature. But I'm talking really, really low temperature, like maybe 10 degrees Kelvin. And for those, you have to cool them with liquid helium. I think liquid helium is about 4 degrees Kelvin. So I think most metals you can kind of cool them with liquid helium and make them become superconductors. But you have to produce the liquid helium first. You have to first produce these ultra cold temperatures, which is very hard to do. So that's why these most superconductors are pretty impractical. And the other thing I didn't say about superconductors, what are they? Well, what happens when a material becomes a superconductor is it loses all of its resistance to electricity. I don't know how many of you guys know about resistance, but there's a thing called Ohm's law, V equals IR, or you have to, every material that we know, every electric circuit that's ever been built has a built-in resistance, and resistance is what impedes the flow of current. You have to provide power. P equals IV. There's V equals IR and P equals IV or P equals I squared R. I mean, you have the resistance is what makes it the need for electric power in order to produce electric current. But if with a superconductor, R is zero. That means you don't have to provide any power. Once you have a current flowing in a superconductor, you don't have to provide any power. It's going to keep flowing forever without the need for power. It's almost like a perpetual motion machine. Of course, if you were running an engine or running an electric device, you still have to need power because you have to, keep increasing the supply of current. But I think you can see the advantage. There's no loss due to heat. So that's all fine and dandy, as they say. But what's really exciting is that I guess superconductors were first discovered in 1911, but then in 1986 I just started studying physics. I just started graduate school in physics when this was discovered. I started at the University of Chicago in 1985, and just the next year, 1986, everybody got really excited because they discovered these exotic materials known as high temperature superconductors. They became superconducting at much higher temperatures than anything that had been known before. Like I think about 130 degrees Kelvin. That's still very cold. I think now it's up to like maybe 210 degrees Kelvin. By comparison, room temperature is about 293 degrees Kelvin. So we still got a ways to go before we get room temperature superconductors. But now we don't have to, it's a lot easier to cool them. We can even cool them with liquid nitrogen. I think the liquid nitrogen is about 80 degrees Kelvin. So all these high temperature superconductors, we can cool them with liquid nitrogen, which we've been able to produce for a really, really long time. I mean, I think even when you go to the doctor, to get anesthesia or whatever. I mean, I know that they use liquid nitrogen for a lot of medical uses. It's not as hard to produce. And this picture on the bottom here shows a superconductor being levitated in a magnetic field. And I've actually seen movies of this. It not only is levitated, but it spins on its own. Pretty remarkable. And so we already have these things, but they're not room temperature yet. But once we have a room temperature superconductor, there's no telling what we'll be able to do with it. I mean, we'll have electricity that runs forever, basically. It won't require practically any power to run, and that'll be pretty amazing. That'll save us a lot of power production. Not only if we have fusion or matter, antimatter power plants, not only will we have a virtually limitless supply of power, but with these room temperature superconductors, we won't even need as much as we did before. So just think about that a little bit. This will be pretty wonderful, and I guess I put it number two because I did read it would have as big an impact on the world as the wheel, and I think I put the wheel as the number two ancient invention. So there is one thing above this. And the thing above this is an abstract invention, really more of a discovery. But this is one that I'm really excited about. And this has been kind of the holy grail of physics for the last 100 years or so. This would be a theory of everything. They used to call this a unified field theory. And Einstein spent the whole latter half of his life looking for such a theory. I mean, this would be a theory, just to explain this in a little more detail. It would be a physical theory that would explain, at least in principle, everything in the universe. That's why it's called a theory of everything. And you might think, yeah, God, how could you have a theory that explains everything? Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we think such a theory exists. There's a lot of reasons a lot of physicists believe that such a theory exists because we've explained, we have a theory of almost everything. We have what's called the standard model of particle interactions. That is a theory of almost everything. It's a theory of everything except gravity. It's a theory of all particle interactions. Yeah, it's an ugly theory. I mean, it's like a lot of smaller theories kind of pasted together in kind of a haphazard way. It also involves 19 free parameters, which most physicists don't like. That's why they're a lot more excited about string theory. And also, string theory, if we can ever figure out how to make it work, would also include gravity. String theory would be a theory of everything if we could ever figure it out. Right now, it's a theory of nothing, and it's been a theory of nothing for the last 40 years or so. So I'm not so enthusiastic about string theory, even though a lot of physicists still are. But maybe we're barking up the wrong tree with string theory. And I mean, I think I should say a little bit more about this theory of everything first. I mean, this diagram on the right kind of shows what's involved in this theory. And on the top is stuff pertaining to quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics is a theory of very small things like atoms and molecules and subatomic particles. And quantum mechanics was first developed during the 1920s. It's been an extremely successful theory. I mean, it basically says everything we know about particles, and so that's why it's a theory of almost everything. But it doesn't include gravity. Gravity, general relativity, that's a modern theory of gravity that Einstein came up with in 1915. This is a theory of very large things like stars and galaxies and planets. And it works really well. I mean, as far as we can tell, it's a correct theory. Nobody's found any deviations from the theory of general relativity. From everything we've studied so far. But here's the problem: there's only one. I mean, they have to be compatible with each other, obviously, because there's large things and small things in the universe. We can't have a theory of large things and a theory of small things that are incompatible with each other because the universe involves both large things and small things, and sometimes they interact with each other. So we have to kind of have a theory that uses both of them, and nobody's really figured out how to do that yet. But we kind of need to. I mean, we are making progress, and I think that the way we're making the most progress with this is studying black holes, because black holes are kind of at the interface of general relativity and quantum mechanics. I mean, one example of that is Hawking radiation. Stephen Hawking was able to come up with a theory of Hawking radiation. In other words, black hole evaporation. Which was kind of a shock when he discovered the theory. But according to quantum mechanics, black holes should evaporate. They should emit particles, and very, very slowly. But we haven't observed it. But I mean, almost all physicists are sure that it's real. And so we're starting to do some of this. We're starting to figure out how to unify general relativity and quantum mechanics. But this science is still in its infancy. And I'm just going to say one more thing about this that I didn't mention on the slide. I guess partly because I didn't have enough room. But I think that there's another reason why we haven't succeeded in this, which I don't think practically any physicists have really considered yet. And I think the reason we haven't succeeded in this regard is we haven't figured out how to incorporate spirituality into this theory or in any scientific theory. I mean, we don't even really have a good interpretation of quantum mechanics. It's kind of weird because quantum mechanics is the most well-tested theory that anybody's ever come up with. It's the most, it's known science and it's passed every test everybody has ever devised. Not only that, but has made the most precise predictions. It's correct to like 10 decimal places. So it's a very, very accurately tested theory. But the problem with quantum mechanics is nobody really understands it. Nobody knows what's going on. It's a very weird theory. There's all these weird consequences of quantum mechanics, like wave particle duality and the uncertainty principle, and things like Schrodinger's cat, and the whole interpretation of the double slit experiment, things like that. People don't really understand what's going on. But I think part of the reason nobody really understands what's going on is because I think that we need to incorporate spirituality or consciousness. I mean, there have been some physicists, I think, including Roger Penrose, who's one of the most famous physicists alive today. He's been thinking about how consciousness might enter into quantum mechanics. As a matter of fact, how to maybe unify it with general relativity. And I kind of agree with that. I mean, I'm sort of thinking about my own interpretation of quantum mechanics that involves consciousness and spirituality. I haven't, ironed it out yet, but I think someday this is a goal of mine. Before I die, hopefully I'll live another 30 years if they can cure my cancer. But at least in the next 10 years, I'd rather do this in the next 10 years because I don't even know if I'll live longer than that. None of us know. But I'd like to develop my own theory of quantum mechanics, my own interpretation of quantum mechanics. I don't think it'll be a theory of everything. It may be kind of a beginning of that. But I want to try to come up with my own interpretation of quantum mechanics that uses spirit, that involves spirituality. I already have some ideas about how to do that. So I'm going to develop that theory and hopefully publish it before I die. But anyway, just thought I'd mention that. And anyway, that concludes my predictions for what I think will be the top 10 inventions of the first half of the 22nd century. So thank you for watching. Keep thinking, and I'll see you guys next time.